Hail and welcome, beloved, to the Dr. Mumbi Show. My name is Dr. Mumbi Seraki. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you are moving into living your best life. Thanks to every single person that supports us on our Patreon accounts. You know, if it wasn't for you, we literally would be, farming by Mount Kenya right now. But we really do thank you for your support, irregardless of what's happening on YouTube. And we will continue to make sure that you get all the necessary stories and updates coming out of Africa and the global Black family. But there's a time that's coming, beloved, where it's going to be beyond the news, where now we're going to be sharing instruments of power. And I say sharing because it's a back and forth, and where we'll really start to be moving into, our chosen paths. I don't want to talk too much about it now, but that's why certain things are happening behind the scenes that we can't really talk about. But it's just about that time. Now, very interesting story coming out of China. It's more like a PR stunt than anything, where the Chinese president has pledged to cancel, interest-free debt owed by relevant African countries. Which countries are relevant and which countries are irrelevant? That's why I tell you guys, how do people pick? We'll give aid to these, we won't give aid to these countries, because, which countries are relevant? All of this is just gibberish. But what happened is that he actually, for the first time since the, what Trump calls the Wuhan virus or the coronavirus broke out, this is the first time that Mr. Xi has actually spoken directly to African leaders. Among the leaders that were present include, the usual suspects, guys. Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta, Senegal's Macky Sall. Ethiopian Prime Minister was also there, Abiy Ahmed. There's a lot of controversy because, Ethiopia is going ahead with their Renaissance Dam, which is going to be a game changer in Africa. But I'll actually do a separate story on that and explain why they're fighting it so much. I have done a few stories on that, but Abiy Ahmed, haven't heard from him in a while. He was also present. But, the thing is, so this story, so many African publications have run with it. China, Africa set to get debt relief from China, blah, blah, blah. But the truth of the matter is that the debt relief that China is offering is only to a percentage, a fraction of their, of their loans or whatever you want to call them. And, when he says relevant, you see, these are the strings attached. And I always say, the Chinese debt traps were copy-pasted from the Western neo-colonial agenda. Like they're all just using the same game plan to try and rob Africa blind. But, so in this speech, he said that, within the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Framework, China will cancel the debt of relevant African countries in the form of interest-free government loans that are due to mature by the end of 2020. For those African countries that are hardest hit by the coronavirus and are under heavy financial stress, China will work with the global community to give them greater support by such means as further extending the period of debt suspension. But now let me tell you, this is such a PR stunt because the debt relief that he's talking about, they've out of all of China's debts, and I think China is Africa's biggest creditor. Africa owes them $145 billion. That sounds like pocket change. To the richest continent in the world, that's like nothing if people would just get the right leaders in place, and get rid of all these society useless leaders. This is nothing. 145 billion, Africa could raise that in a year. If it actually stopped playing these games and taking small money. You're given $1 million for your family and you sell out your nation for future generations for $1 billion. Like what madness are people smoking? So, and the thing is, the reason I'm calling it a PR stunt is because the debt he was talking about is only 20% of the overall debt that's owed to China, that 145 billion. It's 20%. So it's a fraction. And this actually will not change the situation for most. And earlier, there's actually this, Brookings Institute that had said, China and Africa's debt, China had said yes to relief, but no to blanket forgiveness. Although they love to remind us that, China has actually forgiven about 150 150 loans since the inception, like in the last decade or whatever. But most of these loans have been the kind of like zero interest. They're not gaining anything. So these were the gifts they gave. They didn't mind. And it's to the lowest bracket. But do you think Kenya will get debt relief? And our president was there. You know what I mean? Do you really think South Africa will get debt relief? No. Because, debt is strategy as well. Certain nations have been indebted to China as part of their foreign policy strategy. And we've seen the government here in Kenya, they've spoken so many times. They've been accused that they signed as collateral the Mombasa port, which is our major port here in Kenya. But we've seen the government over and over again try and say they didn't sign over, the Mombasa, on Mombasa port. And now, recently, China even had to come out because of the hostility that's, growing every day towards Chinese in Kenya. China had to come out and say, we're not going to take your ports, like, even if you guys default on the loans, like, we'll figure it out. Because, Kenyans weren't having it. And that's why I really don't see this as any kind of solution, It's really not a solution. And the people who have debts are still going to have to pay their debts. And China's not going to just let people go scot-free, And in fact, the Chinese Foreign Ministry commented that the origin, they've tried and say that the origin of Africa's debt problem is very complex, and the debt profile of each country varies, and that it understood that some countries and international organizations had called for debt relief programs for African countries, and they were willing to study the possibility of it within the international community. So China is even saying, I'm not going to make you president, who I see down there, And it was crazy when we saw African presidents arriving in China, and actually just, they get off the plane and immediately they're given a suite and they're like, do you ever see... Anyway, let me not get into that. So it's just like, it's not going to be that easy. China has said they support the suspension of debt repayment by least developed countries and will make it necessary contributions. But now they're even saying, no, let's discuss this in the international community, because we've never seen the Mzungus canceling any debt. Some of us are still paying interest for debt that was accumulated in the 70s or 80s. So you've paid the debt off, but you're still paying interest till this day. And you see, because we don't have our own think tanks as a global black nation that is totally controlled by us, our own think tanks, our own spirit, even spirit tanks. Because we don't have that, then we don't have, and people, they've cursed us by telling us we don't love to read, which is a lie from the pit of hell. We're the ones who invented reading and writing. So why would we not want to read, It's just most of the stuff is boring, right? But on a serious note, because we don't have our own think tanks and our own broadcasting systems that can bring us the information for us to know, okay, how did we get in debt? Which presidents of, in Kenya? So we owe them whatever, however many billions, how did that happen? Which presidents took those loans? What can we do legislation-wise? What can we do, because it's game over. And you see, what's happening now is they're defining the rules of the game for the next phase. And so if you're already game, it's like you've played a game, like a chess game or whatever, or a poker game, let's say. And then, in the next game, you're already being handicapped with this, or they're being gifted with the ace and the joker and all these things. So it's like the rules of the next game, of the next chapter, they're trying to define them by entrapment theory. And by there's no reason that this went globally viral in Africa. Debt relief for relevant African countries. So that means if you're irrelevant, being relevant means you're being nice to China, your people are being nice to China. You see what I mean? And then those countries that have the big numbers that are hardest hit will also get help. These become motivation for some of our leaders. Next thing you'll see, 180 people have corona in one day. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, beloved. Until next time, tuko pamoja.
Malawi, no money. 100.
Angkondo mukabaya mpaka. Ada dijabule ni wala. Kazi ndio kiasi. Yes man. Akula jamani pigi umjabula. 100. Kwa ni sarafu. Ya bwana hadi. Kwa bwana. Hapo ungesa hizo bazo kama. Hadi ya bwana.
Ya, pesa yenu ndogo.
Ya.